Good people YouTube, I'm the Watch Idiot, and I've now had the 41mm Longines Hydroconquest GMT for just about 9 months, and owning it has been much more interesting than I thought it would be. Definitely a roller coaster of emotions, considering that I originally bought this watch for the channel and not necessarily for myself. And at the start, I was thoroughly impressed by it, but I also then wasn't completely blown away after a while of owning it. But now things are way better, and at one point I was actually ready to sell it, but now the more I've been wearing it, especially these past few days, I mean, just the more I'm loving it. So in this video, I'm gonna get into the 3 things that I love about this watch, and then the 2 things that I don't love about the Hydroconquest GMT after 9 months of ownership. And if you want a more detailed review of the watch, or if you want to see how it stacks up against the Spirit Zulu Time 39 or the Marinemaster II 100 GMT, check those videos out afterwards. But let's get into it. And the first thing that stuck out to me from the very start and throughout the 9 months that I've had this is the refinement. It is amazing on pretty much every single level. So my first ever Longines was the 39mm Spirit Zulu Time, and the thing that shocked me about it was just how refined the finish, the look, and the feel was, you know, just so much higher than the price point would suggest. And because of that, I wasn't really planning on getting the Hydroconquest GMT because I didn't need this one, but I was curious and I thought that, you know, you guys would also want to see it too. Man, am I glad that I took the chance to check it out, just because I never could have expected it to be this good. I still love looking at the case size because it's got that spicy Omega brush finish that always looks exceptional, and it also has a super satisfying sharpness on the edges, but of course it doesn't feel like it can actually cut you because that would be unrefined. And I won't talk about the bracelet here since that's gonna have its own love later on, but on the wrist, seeing this watch head with this bracelet, it just looks so well thought out, and it also feels fantastic on the wrist because a watch can look great on every level, but if the wearing experience hasn't been thought out, it's a failure of a watch as far as I'm concerned. And this point really hit home when I wore this watch again after not wearing it for a couple months, because it has happened before that I wore a watch after a long time and I'm like, oh wow, like this isn't as great as I remember it being. But here it was the exact opposite. I wore it and I was surprised by just how great it felt on my wrist again. And to me, if a watch can continue to be impressive after its honeymoon period and after some time apart, it just proves to me that the watch is a great watch. And no joke, if someone came up to me and asked whether or not to get this watch or the Black Bay 41 GMT, and if they didn't have really a preference in looks because they are quite different, I would without a doubt recommend the Hydroconquest GMT. It's just a fantastic watch on every level, regardless of price. So yeah, might as well get I think almost a more refined package and save yourself a whole lot of money as well. So it's a win-win as far as I'm concerned. I mean, seriously, look, the more I'm wearing it, especially this past week, my respect for it has just been increasing. I mean, sometimes it's just nice to have a good, solid, modern Swiss diver. And next up is the bracelet, and it's arguably the best part of this watch, and it plays a huge role in the watch's overall refinement because it delivers on every level, I'd say, and it has everything that I would want from a watch that's even like way beyond this sub 3K price point, which again just makes me even more happy and impressed. The end links flow perfectly into the case, and then the bracelet itself has a great 5mm tapered 21 to 16mm, which is just so much yes for me. And the design of the bracelet is spot on because Longines put on a modern H-link bracelet, and I'm just so happy with this just because this watch could have been close to being a completely forgettable watch if they just threw on a 3-link bracelet and made it look just like any other watch. But they changed it up, thankfully, and on top of the awesome looks, it's super comfortable and it feels really great and smooth on the wrist. It's never caught any of my hairs on my particular wrist, and yeah, I mean, just the refinement is just so good. Next big thing is the clasp, because this is usually where brands try to save some money, but here Longines has gone above and beyond because the fit and finish are spot on. It looks and feels good inside and out, including the buttons that also feel really nice to press. But of course, the big selling point here is that it's got an on-the-fly micro adjustment, which is really helpful for summer days when my wrist expands outside and contracts when I'm inside. side. Although I gotta say that I do wish that there was more of a range because it only expands about 5.3 millimeters, which might not be enough if you're already halfway just to make the watch fit right on your wrist. Tudor's T-Fit, for example, extends 8 millimeters. But overall, I think it's safe to say that this is easily one of my absolute favorite bracelets that I've owned. And the last big love is the dial. And I know this will be controversial, but I grew to actually really love the dial quite a lot. And I actually like that the 6 and 9 o'clock indices are circles. And would it have been better if they made the date at 3 a circle as well, just to change things up and just make things a little bit more uniform? Yeah, but you know, after spending some time with it, I've come to embrace it and I enjoy it for what it is. And actually in my first video with the Hydroconquest GMT, I said that I would have to see whether or not the dial grows on me, and it very much did. Also, a nice bit of character is the handset. The hour hand doesn't have the most lume on it, but it does look like it's its own thing, and I'm glad that this design stayed on from the old Hydroconquest. And I really like the use of orange. It's pretty thoughtfully done, the GMT writing plus the tip of the GMT hand, but also the bicolor 24-hour track on the outside. The orange is used on the top half where it's black, and they didn't have to do that, but they did. But one thing I don't like is that the sunburst finish has a matte coating, I guess you can call it, which I don't think looks that great, but the Pelagos 39 has the same finish, so I'm sure it's there for a reason. What that reason is, I have no idea, but either way, I'm not really a fan of it, but it's not a deal breaker because I have gotten used to it, and sometimes I just see this more as a matte black dial. Also, little side note, I'm glad that they didn't feel the need to just throw on cream colored Fotina here. It's a modern watch and that's totally fine and good. Not everything has to be vintage inspired. I love the crispy contrasty white lume, and also I love that it's fully modern. So the movement is great. It's anti-magnetic and it's got a 3-day power reserve, and the Flyer GMT works well, but there are some big inherent downsides of all Flyer GMT movements. They are just a bigger issue to me due to my use case. You know, things can obviously vary for you, but for me, I prefer collar GMTs all day long. And a quick PSA, there is no such thing as a true GMT and there's no inferior GMT. They each have their own functionality, which work in different situations for different people. And the biggest issue that I genuinely do not like, I think it's just one of the most irritating things in the watch world, but it's changing the date on these. It's just so tedious and irritating because you have to move the hour hand 2 times around the entire dial to go to the next day. And for me, it takes 6 winds to move 24 hours. And let's say the date is, 12, 13, 14, 15 days away, and you're just sitting there winding the crown up 90 times and the hand will have jumped about 360 times, which just makes me feel really bad. But that's just to set the date. I find that aggravating enough, and it just affects my mechanical sympathy enough that if I'm not close to the date, I just won't wear it. I mean, which I think defeats the purpose of having said watch. So if you wear this daily or any other Flyer GMT movement daily, this won't be an issue for you, of course, but for me, I don't, because I rotate watches a lot, so it is an issue for me. And then the next thing is that I only travel across time zones every so often, not so much. I mean, the vast majority of the time I'm in the East Coast, and because of that, I keep the local time where it's at, but I do sometimes like to track a second time zone, and changing the 24-hour hand, which I don't need all the time, requires me to reset everything and then jump the local hand afterwards, which is not very useful for me. And again, this goes for all Flyer GMTs. It's not a price thing, so just a heads up. So this one is a bit more subjective, but it's something that I noted in my very first video, but I do think that this could have been a much more unique watch because Longines has designed some really incredible modern watches, but also they have such an amazing back catalog of old watches that are all very Longines. But to be clear, I wasn't a fan of the previous generation of the Hydroconquest because the bracelet didn't taper, which is basically a deal breaker for me, and it had a lot of polish, and also I wasn't a fan of having only 3 of the giant numerals on the dial, and the logo was super long. But the case design itself was nice, and it definitely was a more unique proposition. This new generation is all around better in basically every single way. However, I do think that they could have tweaked the old case and put it on here because as it stands, it's a very Rolexy, Tudory case, and if you took off the Longines name from the dial, it would be a nice watch, but I would never look at it and think, oh yeah, that's a Longines. Just on its own though, it's great, especially if you don't have or don't want a big collection, or if you just love wearing the watch a bunch. It hits so many marks, and it's something that I've been realizing even more later on in my ownership experience, especially these past few days and the past week or so that I've been wearing it even more. But still, next to my Spirit Zulu Time 39 titanium and my Marinemaster 200 GMT, this just doesn't have the overall X factor, so it naturally will get less wrist time compared to those watches. But still, I mean, again, there's just something really nice about wearing a good, simple, solid Swiss diver. So there you have it. Let me know what you think about the Hydroconquest GMT down in the comments, and until the next video, good day.